This is the golden storybook and tape called Masked Mission Meteor. It was written by Mark Taylor, and the pictures were done by Ralph Reese. Whenever you hear this sound, you'll know it's time to turn the page. After you've listened to the story, you can turn the tape over and record your own story on side 2. Are you ready? Find the picture on page 2, where a meteor is streaking through the sky toward Earth. One night in August, a strange meteor streaked earthward. Even as the meteor crashed to Earth with fire and fury, the United States Army's special units were on the way to lay claim to it. But the evil agents of Venom were also racing to where this glowing object lay. Professor Stevens, in charge of meteor recovery and identification, spoke from the crater's edge.
All personnel remain as you are until given instructions to move in for meteor transport,
she announced. Just then, the crew began to point to the sky and cry out,
UFO, run!
All of her fellow crew members, except one, scattered in panic as the enormous UFO swooped down above the meteor.
Unbelievable,
Professor Stevens muttered. Quickly, she grabbed her video camera and began taking pictures. The UFO hovered for a moment or two and then sped out of sight, leaving confusion and an empty crater. Suddenly, the one remaining crew member came dashing toward the camera. Professor Stevens spun around, jumped into her Jeep, and raced away. Another vehicle zoomed after her. Just as Professor Stevens reached the highway, a laser shot hit her Jeep and sent it into a spin. Clutching the video camera, she jumped from the Jeep just before it hit the lake. She was slightly stunned by a bump to her head. Professor Stevens awoke hours later in Matt Tracker's office.
We must recover the meteor.
She blurted out.
Its powers can be used to heal or hurt many people. It could be dangerous in the wrong hands.
I know,
replied Matt.
The man whose face is on that videotape is Cliff Dagger, one of Venom's agents.
Scott and T-Bob were outside the door listening.
We've got ourselves a mission, T-Bob.
Scott whispered to his mechanical friend.
Let's go!
Matt punched at the computer.
Give me the best agents for this mission,
he told the computer.
Brad Turner, Bruce Sato, Dusty Hayes, Alex Sector, Hondo McLean, Buddy Hawks.
The computer flashed the information on its screen.
Personnel approved,
said Matt.
Assemble Mobile Armored Strike Command.
Answering the call of their beeping watches, the masked team assembled at the Boulder Hill gas station. Quickly, Matt informed them about their mission to retrieve the meteor from Venom.
Hurry, T-Bob!
Scott whispered as the two sneaked into the back of Firecracker and covered themselves with a blanket.
To your vehicles,
Matt ordered. The masked members raced to their vehicles and headed for the desert. As the masked team rolled along in search of Venom, Matt checked his computer. 3 red dots were moving in 3 different directions on the screen.
It's a trident maneuver,
Matt announced to the others.
Venom must be transporting pieces of the meteor to 3 different locations.
As the 3 Venom trucks carried their precious cargo across the desert, Mayhem hovered above in Switchblade. Suddenly, he spied the masked vehicles.
They wish they'd never shown up.
Mayhem muttered angrily.
Switchblade, convert!
He commanded. Immediately, the helicopter converted into a jet, swooped down, and began firing on the masked vehicles.
Thunderhawk, jet mode!
Yelled Matt. In a flash, Thunderhawk quickly converted and lifted off the road, heading toward Switchblade. Gator and Rhino clashed with Jackhammer. Lasers and missiles crackled and exploded wildly. Switchblade passed over the masked vehicles again. This time, it fired a missile directly at Firecracker. As Hondo jerked the steering wheel hard to the left, Scott and T-Bob tumbled from the back of the truck and landed in some soft brush. Hondo was hurt as he was thrown from the truck. Scott and T-Bob rushed over to help him, but then they hid when they saw the other masked team members coming.
What happened?
called Matt as he ran up.
Hondo is hurt.
Said Bruce.
He was trying to avoid a missile from Switchblade.
And
Said Dusty.
I saw Scott and T-Bob fall off the back of Firecracker. Only I don't know where they went.
Scott? Here?
Matt said in surprise.
There he goes now.
Shouted Alex.
He's riding off on T-Bob.
What are we doing now?
Asked T-Bob.
We're going to get that meteor back.
Scott answered. The Venom truck they had followed stopped at a lakeside dock. They watched from a distance as a man stepped out of a seaplane and approached Mayhem.
Do you have the money for your piece of the Meteor?
Mayhem asked him. As Mayhem and the man talked, Scott quietly sneaked into the cockpit of Switchblade.
Scott to Mask. Transmitting from Switchblade. Come in, Mask.
Scott,
Yelled Matt.
what are you doing in Switchblade?
Listen, Dad, I haven't much time. Here are the coordinates of Venom's trucks. Over and out.
Just before getting out of the helicopter, Scott turned it on. The blade swept into motion, and Switchblade began to rock and bounce.
Stop!
Yelled Mayhem, but the uncontrollable helicopter forced him and the other three men to leap into the water. Scott and T-Bob ran to the Venom truck, jumped in, and headed back to Mask headquarters. Meanwhile, Matt directed his team to the Venom trucks from Thunderhawk.
Brad, switch Condor to laser-guided jet mode and head for the airstrip. Dusty, you head out to the beach.
Said Matt.
Condor to Mach 1.
Replied Brad. He shot ahead and was soon a blur in the distance.
Gator on the way.
Said Dusty. Cliff Dagger was already delivering another of the Meteor pieces to an enemy agent. Brad approached at Mach 1 speed, reached out and snatched the metal box containing the Meteor fragment right out of Cliff Dagger's hand.
I'll get you!
Shouted Dagger, shaking his fist. As Brad headed for one of the airplane hangars, Cliff Dagger closed in on him in the Bronco.
I've got you now!
Dagger shouted.
Firing antimatter beam.
Brad said. A flash of light shot out from the nose of Condor's cannon and cut a hole in the wall of the hangar. But as soon as Brad passed through, the wall reappeared and Jackhammer crashed into it. Dusty reached the beach just before Slyrax could hand over the Meteor piece he carried in a metal box.
Freeze!
Dusty shouted. With a blast of Gator's freeze cannon, Rax and the enemy agent were frozen solid. Dusty grabbed the metal box out of Rax's frozen hand.
Keep your cool, Rax.
Said Dusty as he drove away. Back at the lake, the seaplane Scott had reported on earlier was just lifting off the water. Matt and Hondo roared after it in Thunderhawk.
The third piece of the Meteor must be on that plane. I've got to stop it.
Matt said. Suddenly, a blast from out of the blue exploded inches from Thunderhawk. Cannon blasts and lasers began to fly. Matt zoomed down and raced along the water's surface. Switchblade was right on his tail. Quickly, Matt pulled up into a steep climb, looped around, and fired a missile directly at Switchblade.
Bullseye!
Matt shouted as Switchblade spun out of control.
I'll get you yet, sucker!
Screamed Mayhem.
I'll never find that seaplane now.
Matt said with disappointment. Upset that he had failed to find the seaplane and Scott, Matt headed back to Boulder Hill. Hondo was very weak, and Matt was worried. The rest of Masked Team and Professor Stevens had already reached Boulder Hill when Matt arrived. They could see the disappointment on Matt's face.
I'm sorry.
Matt said slowly.
I didn't get the third piece.
Just then, Scott and T-Bob ran in.
Anyone want a meteor?
Cried Scott.
Here's the third piece.
Everyone cheered. Quickly, Professor Stevens added this last piece to the others in the lab. A brilliant light flashed on and covered Hondo.
Hey, where am I?
Said Hondo as he sat up.
Where you belong, Hondo.
Matt said.
Back with the rest of the Masked Team.